Hello, AP Psychology students. Today we're going to be looking at the topic of conducting research. Research in psychology uses a scientific method. We have hypotheses, we have operational definitions, and we want to keep everything as rigorous and scientific as possible so that we can say with confidence that our research has shown us a conclusion about our particular topic of study. Research in psychology itself always begins with a question of interest. You might be interested in what political attitudes are about our upcoming election, or about gun control, or about abortion. You might be wanting to understand if there's a relationship between social media use and self-esteem. So there are any number of questions that we might have when conducting psychological research. Now, back in the 1940s, Doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark were interested in studying the effects of separating children from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of race, generated a feeling of inferiority. Now, when you have a question of interest like that, it's kind of tricky to come up with a study. How are you going to study something like this? And they came up with something called the doll study. Some of you have possibly heard of this study before, and I'm going to show you a short film clip about it here in just a minute. But I would like to mention that the doll study was really important as evidence in the Brown versus Board of Education case that was arguing against the notion of separate but equal when it comes to education, because it was clear that the schools in the United States that were separated solely based on race were not getting equal accommodations. And Mamie and Kenneth Clark believe that it also affected the self-esteem of children of color. So let me show this video clip from a movie about their study called Simple Justice.
Hello there. What's your name? Ginny. That's a nice name. I'm Dr. Clark. Do you like dolls, Ginny? Do you have any dolls? No dolls at all?
Yes, I have one. Sure out.
Well, I have some dolls here. You want to see? Come on. I'll show you. Do you want to play a game with dolls? Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you tell me the answers. You ready? Okay. Which one is the boy doll? And which one is the girl doll? Good. And which one is the colored doll? And Ginny, I want you to hand me the doll that you'd like to play with.
This one.
Now, give me the nice doll.
This one.
Give me the doll that looks bad. Now give me the doll that looks most like you.
Like me?
This one looks most like you. Give me the doll that you would rather play with, Eloise. Fine. Now give me the doll that looks bad to you.
Bad?
Well, yes. There's one that you don't like as well because of the way it looks. Which one of the dolls do you think looks most like you? Just show me the doll that looks like you.
I don't want to.
Why?
I want to go home.
So the doll study did show, Kenneth and Mamie Clark, that children had generated a feeling of inferiority in this separate society in which they lived. This was the first time psychological evidence was used in court cases. Psychological evidence is used all the time now. There are experts in memory, in psychological disorders, in all kinds of fields of psychology that testify in court cases. All right, so let's go through the scientific method and how to do research. As I already mentioned, it begins with a question of interest. I had a question of interest a couple of years ago about whether cheating on exams was a problem at EHS. And so I decided to form a study to find out what the extent of cheating was. So you need to develop a broad theory, and you develop your theory based on prior research and evidence. So if you're doing research at a university, you would do something called a literature review, and you would see what other kind of research has already been done on the topic that you're interested in. You would also look at evidence of your own. Now, I had evidence that cheating was a problem, and then I formulated a testable hypothesis. So the hypothesis is what you're actually testing. My hypothesis was that cheating is indeed a problem at Edina High School, as defined by the number of incidences of cheating. You design the study, and part of that is choosing the best method. There are three types of methods. First, you have a descriptive method, and this is going to merely describe a process. That's all I wanted to do, was describe whether or not cheating was a problem at EHS. So if I wanted to find out how much time they spend on social media per day, that's merely describing a process. A correlational study is going to find a relationship or predict a behavior based on two covariables. So in this case, I might want to ask, is there a relationship between time spent on social media and high school performance? Or I can do an experiment. I can do this to determine cause and effect. So does social media use cause an increase in self-esteem? So in the experimental approach, we're going to have two groups, an experimental group, that's the one that's using the social media in this case, and a control group, one that's not using social media. And then we measure the self-esteem after a period of time. We need to give operational definitions of the variables. How will you actually measure the data? This has to be specific and it has to be measurable. So if you're talking about something like social media, what are you going to count as social media? Are you going to count Facebook, Instagram, TikTok? Will you include something like Reddit or Quora? Are these considered social media or not? So you have to be really specific, and then you have to identify how you're going to measure it. For example, the number of minutes spent on social media. For my operational definition for my particular study, I said cheating is copying or otherwise accessing answers to exam questions during semester 1. I did this test in semester 2. This research. And then you perform the research. After you perform the research, you analyze the data using statistics, and you report your results. This is if you are working in a professional environment in a professional journal. What you really want to happen is replication. Replication is going to confirm your results or make corrections to design flaws. Now, the way that I did my study was I had a survey, and I asked students to check off a box. Did they cheat 0 times according to the definition I just gave? 1 to 3 times, 4 to 8 times, or 9 or more times. And I merely made a bar graph here to show what my results were. Now, another reason why we want replication is to stimulate further research of related topics. So I might want to find out why students cheat, not just whether or not they cheated. According to this, more than half of the students said that they did not cheat at all during semester 1. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, because it was a survey, and one of the inherent flaws of surveys is people might lie. All right, so let's look at descriptive research methods in particular. Like I said, they merely describe a pattern. They do not predict what will happen with a behavior. They do not determine cause and effect. One type of descriptive research we might do, especially for unusual cases such as serial killers, feral children, maybe even like highly successful CEOs, is we can do a case study. In a case study, we look at many facets of the individual's situation. You would look at health records, school records, legal records, public records, to try to find out as much information as possible about that individual. The case study can be useful in getting insight into a particular individual, but they cannot discern general truths as a whole, so they're not generalizable to the larger population. Naturalistic observation is another way that we can describe behavior. Well, in naturalistic observation, what we want to do is observe authentic behaviors in a natural setting. You've maybe seen this when you have had your teachers observed by a teacher coach during a class. Now, the problem with naturalistic observation is the behavior may not be authentic if it is noticed. In other words, I know that someone is coming in to watch me teach. I may act differently than I do when I don't have someone watching me. So that's an important consideration, that if you are doing naturalistic observation, that the observer not be noticed. Now, this can be a good approach for children. I've had people come into my classroom who are assessing someone's ability to stay focused in class for a diagnosis for ADHD, for example. You can look at children in a playground, and you can measure aggressive behaviors. So anything that you can do to observe an authentic behavior without being noticed could possibly, you could possibly research using naturalistic observation. Archival research is just gathering data from multiple sources. So, for example, if we wanted to look at the rates of use of antidepressants during an economic downturn, we could check on the resources of pharmaceutical companies or other medical records to find out if depression is indeed more common during an economic downturn. A survey. Surveys are great. I just did one for this political season. I always am careful when I answer a survey, however, to ask who is sponsoring the survey, because surveys have a way of wording questions in a way that they can get the response that they desire. Excuse me. So, in a survey, you gather information from a large number of respondents, and it is inexpensive and quick. So you can call people randomly and ask them about their political views towards a particular candidate, or their views towards something like gun control or capital punishment. The problem is that people may lie, especially if they don't feel like they're in a confidential place where they can answer honestly. Important design considerations for a survey is something we call wording effects, or also known as framing. So how the question is asked, and Gallup, by the way, did the first question there. Gallup is known for having pretty good wording. However, the NRA they use the second question in taking a survey on the very same legislation. And the way they framed the question will get you to answer in a certain way. Well, of course, we don't want to spend 20% of all dollars now spent on crime control in a national gun registration program. So do be careful when you're taking a survey. By the way, if you start taking a survey and you don't feel comfortable with the way that the questions are going or the way that they're worded, you can just say, you know what, I don't want to be part of the survey anymore. That is a right that any research participant has, is to merely withdraw from the research. And I have done that before when I can tell that the surveyor is going in a particular direction. So what you want to look for is neutral wording. The last survey I did was done by ABC News and the Washington Post, and it was about the election coming up, and I thought they did a really good job of using neutral wording when asking their questions and providing a variety of answers that I could choose from. So the next recording will be on correlational research, also very important, but keep in mind these 4 descriptive methods that I just talked about. Thank you very much. Have a great day.